name is Nora.
Sorry.
Kia ora again. A very warm welcome to everyone to today's webinar on Te Whatu Aho Rau, the Information Evaluation Framework. My name is Nora Sia Muhammad Amin. I'm your facilitator for the session. We are thrilled to have you with us today, Dr. Angela Feekery and Catherine. And we promise that this will be a rich and insightful correro. Again, I would like to highlight a few housekeeping notes. Please keep your microphone muted during the presentation to minimize background noise. We encourage you to use the chat for comments or questions throughout the session. There will be a dedicated Q&A session after the presentation, so feel free to jot down your questions as you go. Again, the session will be recorded and will be shared with participants afterward. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Angela Feekery. So Angela is a senior lecturer with a diverse teaching background in communication, academic writing, as well as sciences and business communication. She's passionate about helping students become confident communicators and ethical users of information. Her research focuses on communication and the development of information and digital literacies in academic and professional contexts. She is especially committed to creating practical resources that support educators in this space. So in today's webinar, Angela will share insights into the development journey from Rauru Whakarare to Te Whatu Aho Rau, her Anga Arotake Evaluation Framework. She will explore the rationale for change and the vision underpinning the new framework, key differences between the two frameworks, how Te Whatu Aho Rau reflects evolving pedagogical and cultural priorities, as well as practical ideas for adapting and applying the framework in tertiary information literacy instruction. We are honored to have, I don't have a bio for the other presenter, but probably Catherine, you will introduce yourself. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Angela and Catherine. Over to you, Angela. You
Unmute, yes. Rookie mistake. So, yes, hopefully, is my screen sharing okay now?
Yes.
Okay. So, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, he tangata tiriti aho no ingarangi o ku tipuna. I whānau mai au I ahuriri, I tipu aki o reira, no reira ko Aotearoa tōku whenua tipu. Ko Burgess a Feekery, te ingoa tōku whānau, ko Angela Feekery tōku ingoa. I tēnei wā ke papaya oia aho e noho ana, kei te kura pūkinga tangata, I te kuninga ki pūre hurua o e mahi ana. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā anō tātou katoa. Thank you for welcoming me here today to speak with you about the shift from Rauru Whakarare through to Te Whatu Aho Rau and the journey that I've been on. So I'll just sort of start by saying that critical information evaluation continues to be one of the most important aspects of information literacy, I think, that students need to develop so that they can navigate the information landscapes that they inhabit. And we've seen a real increase in carefully crafted misinformation and disinformation on the web. We're exposed to that. And so this makes our information landscape more like an information minefield that students have to navigate and work safely through. And then we're adding to that now the evolution of generative AI, and that produces human-sounding text, but fails to acknowledge where the ideas come from. It's basically plagiarizing ideas from all over the place. And when it's asked for sources, particularly the free versions, they tend to hallucinate where the ideas come from, misrepresent what the source is saying. So today I'll start off with Kawaio, who am I? And then talk a little bit about the Rauru Whakarare framework and shifting it through to Te Whatu Aho Rau, and then how we've moved from a shift to evaluating the credibility of information more to how we engage ethically with the knowledge through this shift in thinking that we've done. So I'm starting with who am I, because I think one of the key factors when we're evaluating information is, does this person have the expertise and mana to speak to this topic? So I'll give you a brief background of my research and information literacy projects that I've been involved in. So as you know, I'm not a librarian, I'm an academic. So my introduction to information literacy came with my PhD study, my doctoral study. Embedding information literacy into the disciplines was my topic, and it was a scholarship opportunity. So I didn't want to pay for my PhD. I was looking for scholarships. And I thought, oh, this one sounds interesting. And it was kind of looking at academic voice and embedding information literacy into the disciplines. And that was, my supervisor was Professor Lisa Emerson, who you may have heard of, and I went on to do projects with Lisa. So once I started to explore what information literacy was, I thought, how could I as an academic not know what this is? How has this not come across my understanding? And so in that space, I kind of became the academic information literacy champion that the literature at the time was calling for. So the librarians had all these ideas, but they couldn't gain access into spaces, curriculum, those kinds of things. They were kind of being kept to 50-minute library workshops, introducing databases. And that was kind of about what their involvement was in some of the introductory first-year courses, if they got that space. So the next two projects that I was involved in with Lisa was around how we could foster genuine collaborative partnerships with librarians as academics and create this explicit space within the curriculum for students to build and these competencies and have them assessed in those spaces. So our first project from 2013 to 2015 was called Enabling Academic Literacy, Smoothing the Transition to Tertiary Learning. And so this was a large action research project that investigated how we could more effectively enable students from secondary school coming into tertiary education, build some of those academic literacy skills that they would need. And so we did interventions at the secondary school level, we did interventions in the first year courses that we were teaching. And the aim of the project was to improve the retention of university students once they entered, because we were supporting that academic literacy transition. So that was the first project that we were on. We had some success with that program. And what we started to do was model sustained partnership and collaboration between the teachers and librarians in those spaces. We were way more successful in the secondary sector than we were in the tertiary sector. So yeah, we got teachers and librarians at schools working really well together, but we didn't have as much impact in the tertiary sector. So we then embarked on our second project from 2017 to 2019, and this one we called Transforming the Information Literacy Space to Support Student Learning. And so this project really extended our learnings from the first project that we'd done, again, trying to improve students' information literacy competencies, transition and learning through the secondary senior school and into the tertiary sectors. And we partnered with 9 secondary schools and 5 tertiary institutions within that project. And that's actually where I met Catherine, who was going to pop in later on and share some of her insights. So we developed the project's more holistic definition of information literacy, and we created a new model of information literacy. It's a little bit small on the screen here, but you can kind of see it, where we centered information literacy at the center of what we do, and then connected that through to academic literacy and disciplinary literacies and other literacies our students needed to develop. So we used this model in our collaborative partnerships so that teachers and librarians were on the same page for what we were talking about. And then I updated this model in 2024, 2025 to add AI literacy with another couple of elements, given the evolution that's taking place in this space. And it was during that project in 2018 where I co-developed the Rauru Whakarare Evaluation Framework with Carla Jeffrey. So with Carla, just quickly recognise here, we collaborated together for the framework. It was an attempt to weave a Māori-informed approach into the information evaluation process. And what we found was that framework clearly filled a gap in the Aotearoa New Zealand secondary schools and tertiary sectors, because the framework was widely adopted by social science teachers. It went on to university library websites around New Zealand and started to be used in a lot of practice of teachers across both sectors. we attempted to address the weakness that we saw in Western linear approaches to evaluation. So you've probably heard of the CARS checklist, the CRAP checklist, those kinds of tick box approaches where you go through it's key information criteria that were designed to help students determine whether an information source was credible, reliable, relevant, authoritative, purposeful, or accurate. So we kind of had those checklists. But we kind of recognized that that process encouraged a really surface approach to information evaluation, and our students didn't really understand it. So it's like, if it's a journal article, it's quality, right? I can trust the journal. And, surely politicians have to be honest and reliable information sources, right? They can't lie to us. So these kind of things were happening, and we saw that it wasn't really capturing what we wanted to do. So Carla and I looked at the Rauru Whakarare framework. We tried to embed that into our work, what we were doing. So we hope, it was really, really good, and it was going really, really well, and I was really happy with it. And then I got into conversations with the social studies network, looking at could we use the framework to underpin the new histories curriculum that was being embedded in the early sort of 2021 kind of stages. So I started gathering information from people who were using the framework sort of 2 or 3 years along. What were you doing? How was it going? And a lot of people actually were reaching out to me and updating me on what they were doing. So I had a kind of ongoing insights into what was happening in a few spaces around New Zealand. With the social science network, I was able to form a new connection with a Māori educator who was in that group. And she generously offered her time to talk to me about several concerns that she had that made her reluctant to use the framework with her students or promote it more widely in that sector. So some of the key concerns that were coming out of this feedback was crossover of the sections. So the crossover between whakapapa and orokohanga, what was the background, what was the origin, kind of those two were being conflated a little bit. How did mana fit into it very well? There was concern over the image, the Rauru Whakarare image that we had in the framework. And it was interesting because the advisor that I was speaking to, Rauru was her ancestor. And so she knew who Rauru was and what the artwork meant to her iwi. And she said that that image was not intended for this kaupapa, that it had no meaning in this space. It wasn't for this kaupapa. And then in the document, I had it landscape in some parts, vertical in other places, horizontal, and in one place I actually had it upside down, which I was not aware of. But you see, the images, they're set in one kind of view. We moved it around. That wouldn't have been done with an image like that. So Māori wouldn't use the image in that way. There was also a key concern that the framework name didn't reflect information evaluation process in any way. So when they hear Rauru Whakarare, it has no meaning to them in terms of what information evaluation connects to. And then the main concern was that we were saying mana means, orokohanga is. And so we were defining Māori terms in a way that she felt were really not useful for young Māori who were perhaps on a beginning journey of te reo, who were exploring their whakapapa, that we were defining the terms. But really it was only how we understood them within the space that we were working within, a very narrow context of use of those terms. So they were the main kind of concerns that were brought to my attention. So for me, my view on learning is, thanks to Maya Angelou, is do your best until you know better, and then once you know better, do better. So this conversation and the feedback that I'd received started me on, well, what do I need to do? Obviously, there are flaws, and I think there were significant flaws. The framework itself, the terms, the questions were okay, but these bigger picture issues for me, I felt needed to be addressed. Between 2018 and 2024, I have done a lot of work on what it means to be a tangata tiriti ally. For Māori, how do we find ways to ensure that their voices inform the spaces that I inhabit? So these people are telling me it's not working, I need to listen. I can't just say, well, it's fine, it does what it needs to. I'm hands off, use it if you want to, or don't use it if you don't want to. For me, it's important to, ensure that I was working with, honest, te tiriti honouring ways. So I had several conversations with my Māori and Pākehā colleagues about what I was learning, and started thinking about how could we reimagine the framework that we were using, because there was kind of both agreement and disagreement about the feedback from different iwi, different groups that were there. But all of them provided rich insights to me, and it gave me a reflective moment to consider, what did I actually hope to achieve with this framework? What was it out there for? How did that connect to the information evaluation process and student learning? So I was fortunate to work alongside Rupena Tawhai. He's our Kai Arataki Māori Senior Māori Curriculum Advisor here at Massey. I'd met him in a range of spaces, and so I connected to him for advice regarding this kaupapa. I reached out and said, hey, Rupena, I need some help here. Can we have a conversation about this? And through those conversations, Rupena agreed to collaborate with me to re-envision the framework and create a new image that was fit for purpose and come up with a new name. And then we set about reconsidering the kupu that represented those interconnected layers of the evaluation process. And we engaged in deeper conversations about how Te Ao Māori insights and values could inform the way that we engage as consumers and creators of information. So, yeah, we're talking quite a few hours of conversation here, going back and forward until we came up with a plan of what we were doing. So then we revisited the 5 original terms, and we reimagined them as 4. And in the new framework, mana underpins the whole framework. So he said it's very difficult to separate mana out from everything else, because you're using that as the foundation for understanding everything. So that came into there. So in terms of the framework and the shared principles that we carried through, was that both frameworks advocated for holistic engagement. We didn't want to go back to checklisting. But we're not just considering the origin of the information, but also the intent of the information that's produced and created, and how it connects to other ideas related to the same topic. Both of the frameworks emphasize the ethical use of information and the responsibility of the information seeker in finding quality information to support their learning, to support their ideas. So that hadn't changed. That was common. They both also embed Māori perspective. So we changed the language. So I think I'd said that it was a kaupapa Māori informed framework. It's not. And that was one of the key critiques. This is not how Māori would evaluate Māori information. I'd said in the framework, you can apply this to all sources of information, but was pointed out you can't. We cannot apply the framework to Māori taonga tuku iho, to their whakatauki, their stories. Directly. There's other ways of thinking about those things. And certainly we can bring them into the conversation, but there's other frameworks and other ways of evaluating those kinds of information sources. So we kept they're both embedding a Māori perspective. So we changed that from kaupapa Māori to a perspective, Māori perspective on what we're doing that is connected to whakapapa mana and mātauranga. And they're the guiding principles for evaluating the Western notions of credibility that we've got there. We kept whakapapa and māramatanga, the understanding and genealogy and enlightenment capacity of information and knowledge at the centre of what we were doing. So that was really important. So in terms of the shift, the kind of structure and philosophical shift, I kind of felt like once we reviewed the Rauru Whakarare framework, it's integrating Māori values into that Western framework. So we kind of brought in Māori term, but we'd laid that on top of an existing framework. I was using some of the same questions, the criteria, those kinds of things. So we kind of had that in there. So, and the other key concern or feedback that came was it was created primarily for students evaluating written sources in academic contexts. So we had quite a strong focus on peer review, the author, the credibility of the author, those kinds. So we're using the words author suggests written text in those spaces. And one of my colleagues had come to me saying, hey, I want to use this for YouTube clips. How do I do that? Would you say that they are the author? So we shifted it to the information creator, the person who's creating the information in a range of different ways to try and extend how we could apply the criteria to different types of information beyond written text. So when we looked at Te Whatu Aho Rau, it re-centered Te Ao Māori as the primary lens to look at this framework. So rather than saying, here's a Western one, can we overlay Māori ideas on top of it? It was, well, how would we think about this coming up from the bottom as Māori, and then embed that and weave that with the Western ideals. So it's still a collaboration of ideas, but the Te Ao Māori lens was front and center this time, as opposed to saying, here, I've got this framework, can we put some Māori lens on top of that? So we kind of reversed that process. So we're hoping that the new framework does better challenge that linear, hierarchical Western approach and repositions that knowledge as being more relational, fluid, and interdependent on the ideas that are around us. We're moving from kind of a credibility judgment of that source to a more relational engagement with the ideas contained within the source. So, who's the author, what's the date, where's it published? Kind of, it's still important, but it's really considered alongside the other ideas of where it fits into the conversation and things like that. And we design this for learners, for researchers, for professionals, for communities engaging with all forms of information, written, oral, visual, digital, in relational and ethical ways. So we tried to move it away from that focus on academic written texts that were in there. So like I said, a key critique of the Rauru Whakarare framework was the use of the image that we had there. So one of the early stages of the redesign was to come up with a new image that would represent this kaupapa. And after we had a few conversations, we had a good sense of where we were going with the reimagined framework. We had the new kupu sorted out. And so Rupina asked Maihi Pōtaka, he was a Māori visual artist who was working at Massey at the time. And we asked if he would be able to work on a bespoke image that was specific to this kaupapa and what we were trying to do. So Maihi came to one of our meetings and he just sat and listened as Rupina and I were talking about the changes that we were doing, and he was drawing and things were just coming to him as he was listening into what we were doing. It was quite an amazing process to observe. And he drafted the images, he started making connections between what we were saying and some of the Māori motifs that he felt could capture some of these meanings and concepts that we were discussing. So then he designed the 4 images that captured the individual concepts and then integrated them into the complete image for the framework. And we do describe the images in the document now to capture the thinking behind why each of these images captures the essence and intention of the concept that it represents within this framework. So like the Rauru Whakarare pattern, where all the images fit together to create a whole, we are hoping this represents a comprehensive, interconnected process, and we want to consider all of those concepts in relation to the whole process together. So hopefully you see that in the image as well. I was pretty stoked when I saw the image. I won't lie, I got tears in my eyes because it was just so much more meaningful than the image that we had previously selected because of the method that we'd gone through to develop it. So the other critique of the Rauru Whakarare framework, like I said, was the title. It had no meaning, it had no connection to information evaluation. So we had to think of a new name that would capture the kaupapa of the framework and linked well to the idea of the ways that we engage with information. And so Rupina felt that Te Whatu Aho Rau effectively captured the essence of the framework. And there were 2 meaningful interpretations. Of course, it can be interpreted in other ways, but the 2 interpretations of the phrase that reflected what we were trying to achieve was the weaving of 100 threads, which kind of encapsulates the idea of how mātauranga or knowledge emerges literally from weaving many ideas together, that we're coming through that, and our fact and our intuition form the basis of what we call knowledge. So all of this is woven together. So that was the weaving of 100 threads. And the other interpretation is the eye catching 100 lights. And so that was connected to the overwhelming amount of information that we need to process and filter before we can have a clear, informed knowledge of a specific topic. And then we can also identify the important ideas within that big picture. So Te Whatu Aho Rau captured beautifully, I think, what information evaluation is about and how we're connecting and engaging with the ideas of those who've come before us, but also the ideas that we are contributing to this conversation and taking that forward. So that's kind of where it came from in there. So in terms of the shifts, what did we change in the framework? So whakapapa and orokohanga were kind of merged into the term pūtaketanga. So pūtake is the source of an idea, the seed that the idea comes from. And so we put those two together. And this does explore the whakapapa of the ideas over time. It focuses on background, context, audience, and it's expanding to more the idea of linking past, present, and future. And this was a very important part of a Te Ao Māori perspective. They're always thinking on that 3 point of time. So what happened in the past, what's happening now, how will this affect the future? Like Rupina said, they're thinking about his mokopuna, his grandchildren are at the center of his thinking and his design and what he's doing now. So not himself, not his own children. He thinks even a generation ahead, which is very different to the way Westerners think about decisions that we're making now. So we moved that in. So it was, relational, iterative, and temporal. And we're moving from the contextual background, like what country did the research come from, which is, in some of the checklists, to more that genealogical belonging of ideas. So how do these ideas fit into the evolution of the idea development and conversation that we're having? So that was kind of a shift in mindset. In terms of the orokohanga, it was embedded. And again, it's that dynamic relationship between time and place and the lineage of that knowledge. So they all come together within the one term now. Mana was taken out as a specific item or concept within the framework, and it became the structural energy underpinning the entire framework. So it's kind of the living force connecting all elements in Te Ao Māori. So it wasn't a criterion of authority, like, does it have mana? Does the person have mana? It's the mana of the person, the ideas, the context, the conversations that are happening. It's all of it. So it flows through all of the evaluative acts that we're doing in this space. And it talked about the knowledge that is tapu, restricted knowledge, and the unrestricted knowledge that we have access to. And this is very important in a Te Ao Māori context, because there is pockets of knowledge that are held and kept by certain people in those spaces that are not shared widely. So we have some ideas, whereas Western, we kind of think open access to everyone, but there is definite knowledge that is held within specialists and specific people within iwi structures. So it was recognizing that there is a difference in that. It's not just for everyone. And so we're having that more ethical foundation, that we're linking these elements, we're demanding that ethical tiriti or honouring engagement with information, not demanding people tell us what they shouldn't have to. So Aronga was retained but expanded. So before we had it as the lens, and now we've changed it to lens, perspective, and purpose. So expanding that a little bit more. The previous Rauru Whakarare focused a lot on bias. Can you identify the bias, the objectivity? As Rupina explained, in Te Ao Māori, objectivity is not really a thing, because you cannot separate yourself, your mana, your whakapapa from, and put that aside and evaluate anything neutrally. It's part of who you are. So even if we think we're being objective, we still have our histories, our understanding, the sources we've engaged with to inform our understanding that we bring to that evaluation that we're doing. So we can't escape that. So it was more around what is our perspective, what is our positionality as we engage with this information, particularly if you're looking for a source that already justifies what you believe, as opposed to genuinely exploring other alternatives or other perspectives on the same issue. And so self-reflection of the information consumer is also at the heart of this. So how am I, when I read this and engage with it, how is it affecting my learning? How am I reflecting on what I understand? How am I changing my ideas in this space? So yeah, moving from just bias, because everything's biased. Even when I write an article, I put my ideas up front and make sure that what I think is front and center, and I might acknowledge some other ideas, but I'm going to push my agenda. So we want to recognize who is the positionality in ourselves and in others, and it's that real reflexive awareness of what's going on in that space. Māramatanga we also kept, but we changed it from content to understanding. So it's not just the content, the relevance, the clarity, the usability, It's now become how the ideas emerge and grow and transform over time. And it does emphasize that enlightenment. How does engaging with these sources change my understanding, extend my understanding, enhance my understanding of this issue? So that's built in more. And also the impact within communities. So the new kind of framing was not just how does this information affect me, how does the information I produce affect my audience, but also broader, how is it going to affect those maybe who I hadn't considered in the conversation initially. So it's definitely, from comprehension of content to usable, transformative engagement with information to encompass growth, dialogue, and reciprocal knowledge sharing. So that's kind of the idea around that shift. And then we introduced the new element, and I think this is the one that I'm most excited about in the framework, because I have always been an advocate of researchers' conversation. I've previously presented around Burke's parlor metaphor that you may be familiar with, that you walk into a room, the conversation's happening, you wander around and you kind of hear what's happening and you join one of the conversations and have your say and do whatever, and then the end draws near and you leave the conversation, but it keeps going without you. So that metaphor and that idea of conversation is always connected with me as the idea of when we engage. So Tātai Hononga was about connections, and it's about the interwoven relationships between ideas, between disciplines, between communities, and foregrounding that collective dialogue and collective understanding that's happening. And this kind of connected to the idea with when we do research as researchers, we sometimes go to a community and we do our research and we draw up and we get our publications out there. But what actually happened to the community? Did that research make a difference in their lives? How was their voice captured in what we did? So we often hear about over-researched communities, and the research makes no difference in their reality. So this was a really important thing for Rupena focusing on, that what we're doing and what we're engaging with is actually improving the lives of those affected by decisions. So that came into here. So it's our collective understanding, growing together. What does this mean? So relationality, conversation, knowledge is interwoven, collective. There's contextually bound, and it's all about connectedness and dialogue in these conversations. So that was the new part that we brought into there. Am I going for time? I think I'm okay. So in terms of how do we use the framework, what can we do going forward? And I can give you some specific examples of my course where I make students evaluate things. We put it into assessment. We get them to reflect on it. So it's making it explicit in the spaces that our students are working. But the feedback we've had so far from some people is that the complexity, that this model's harder. It's not as easy to weave in. It's because it's got that deeper thinking behind what we're doing. It's a little bit harder to grasp what we're trying to do here. So you can modify it to suit your students or the people that you're working with. It may not necessarily be students in that space, but try not to reduce it to one or two concepts. So some of the things that I was seeing with the previous framework, people would only teach mana, or they would only teach whakapapa. And it's like, but you can't separate them. It has to be, all of the ideas are woven together. We really want to keep it intact, keep it holistic, keep it iterative, and don't reduce it back to a checklist. One of the things that I saw in the university websites, because web design is linear, you can't really present anything circular on a website. When you listed it as, this one, this one, this one, it was giving it a hierarchy that wasn't intended. So we've got to make sure that we're, the ways that we're presenting it, we're not saying that this particular criteria is better than this one. We've got to keep that in mind. We need to recognise the mahi that's already been done in embedding the Rauru Whakarare framework. So here at Massey, I think we've got 10 or 12 first-year courses across the different colleges and disciplines that have embedded the framework somehow into their courses. And that took a lot of work between the librarians and the lecturers to build comfort and understanding and create space for that to come back and say, hey, here's a new framework. We want you to change what you've done. There could be resistance. There has been resistance. So the Rauru Whakarare framework, it's still fit for purpose in many ways. It's not, oh, we have to get rid of that one and never talk about it again and use this one now. It's an evolution from one to the other, and that's going to take time and conversations with the people who are using it. So I think these sessions, I'm talking to the librarians at Massey, I've been down to Vic and talked to librarians there, where it's like this is a process of changing and shifting, and it may not be, you know, it's just the Pantene ad. It may not happen overnight, but it will happen. So, you know, through 2025, use what you can, but hopefully towards the end of 2026, we might have shifted and transferred most people across to the new framework. Later this year, I'm just waiting. Rupina's working hard. I should have the bilingual version. That's what I'm waiting on. The translation's almost done. So I can release it to the wild in the bilingual format rather than widely pushing this one out and then having to say, hey, look, here's another version of it. So at the moment, it's being shared with particular audiences, but I haven't done the massive push in contacting institutions saying, hey, here's the new framework. So that's coming hopefully before the end of this year. I've given them till the end of November, but we'll see how we go because, you know, I can't force that. So recognize that mahi, it could be a transition from one to the other for people who are already engaged and using the original framework. I think it's really important to teach and model the framework in practice with the people that we're working with. So if you've got some sources that students are using, analyze them using the framework and give them a model of what that looks like. What are the kind of questions you're asking? What are some of the things that we're looking at? When I saw this source, what came to mind? What are the things that I connected with in here? So model it and make it an information evaluation, an explicit part of assessment if you have any control over that. So for those of you who have the opportunity to work with teachers, to work with academics, try and carve out some space in the assessment where information evaluation, the quality of sources that have been used, the engagement with those ideas is captured in the marking rubric. Provision of sources, annotated bibliographies, all of those things with the bibliography showing, well, how did you engage with these concepts in that space? We want to ensure that other people in the program or the broader context are actually familiar and aware of its existence. What we found was we did a whole lot of work at first year, and then the students would go to second year and say, hey, what's the whakapapa of this source? And the lecturer would go, the what? The what now? you know, the whakapapa, the background, where does it come from? So we weren't doing a good job of making it vertically through programs. And so I need to do more work there myself in terms of, we're doing a great job with this particular group, but how does that then go vertically in the context that we're in? And I do have queries around it being a self-access tool, just providing it to students to work it out for themselves. Should have a question mark there. I don't think it's self-access. It can be once you've understood and unpacked it. We do have a video that I've got on my Google site where it's shared. You can watch the video and it does unpack some of the concepts. But I really, it can be a self-access tool once you've had that deeper conversation of why this matters. Otherwise, it's another thing that they probably won't look at. And we've been thinking too about the use in professional contexts. So hopefully the students that we're working with now, as they go through and build, they'll come out having this framework as part of their kite of tools when they're looking at information. But you might be working with professionals who are already in the workplace, out of university for a very long time, but do have to get information, do have to do some research. It's quite, suitable for them to think about how the framework could be used to justify the sources that they are creating as well. And so professional development workshops in those professional spaces could be a use of the tool as well. So I'm just going to hand over here to Catherine because I know that she's been doing some fantastic work with embedding the framework in her context. So I'll stop sharing and Catherine, can you let us know the fantastic things you've been doing?
Kia ora, kia ora koutou katoa, no mai haere mai, ko Ngāti Pākehā te iwi, ko Wani o Mata te hukainga, ko Catherine Doughty toka wingoa, kaurauhi tātai turi aho mo pupatia, no reira tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you everybody for coming along, and thank you Angela for asking me to share. So I'm the law librarian at Victoria, and we have been using it in to help our law students I'm just putting up on the screen there. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So this is actually part of a subject guide that we've got to support all students. So we're featuring Te Whatu Aho Rau Information Evaluation Framework here, and I've created this digital object that can be embedded into online courses, very easily to be opened, and it prompts the user, you know, the questions. And I use that when I'm teaching. And by the way, if anyone's interested, I'm happy to share that. When we had the earlier framework, I did that as well. So let me know. But essentially, I work with our first year law students, our undergrads, and I go into we have a lecture. I go into the lecture room and I discuss and share. Well, I introduce them really to the framework and to critical evaluation. And for some of them, it isn't a brand new critically evaluating. Some of it's new, some of it's they've come across thinking about these things before. But we do that. They've also got an activity in their tutorial. One of their tutorials, they have to select a source that could be useful for an upcoming assessment, and they have to critique it and discuss it. So there's, more than just the talk, the 1 hour talk with the librarian. And actually, when I do that lecture, I try and get them to talk to their to discuss what we're talking about with their neighbour, and then I split them into groups and we look at different sources. So it is definitely an excellent teaching tool to generate discussion. And then they have more discussion in their tutorial, and then it's looking at their sources is part of their the assessment rubric for their first written piece of work. So, and then any opportunity I get with other undergrads, I try and introduce this. Unfortunately, our law students don't get as many opportunities to practice what we would call a research essay type assessment. But then when we get on to postgraduate, it's really important. And I've created, within a self-guided advanced legal research module, there is a module on evaluating sources, and this framework is modelled so the students can go through it at their pace. We have a session together on campus, and it's discussed. They also have to have an assessment that asks them specifically to write and to critique the sources they're using. So not just to analyse, like a lot of lawyers can do very well, and they have to be very analytical, but to actually dig deeper and to really think critically around why they have, or why not, why have they excluded a source. And, this framework really, they know it to a certain degree, but it really does prompt them with each of the questions. And and then of course they're evaluated on that research guide, and then they're evaluated on their final written assessment. So what we've done is we've built some learning activities besides the librarian just fronting up and talking, which is better than nothing, but something that really relates to the context that they're learning. So the thing is too that I should just say about the undergrads, I did ask Angela, and I'm learning about this all the time. I said, do they need to answer all these questions? Is it really essential they answer every single one of them? And Angela said, this is a guide. All right, so this is not, it's a guide. And that's, how I couch it now. Just in the last few weeks, we've actually at Vic had quite an exciting time. We've had a research skills book for postgraduate students published. And I just wanted to bring this to your attention too, because within this book, we've got just within the context of the framework, we've got evaluating your information sources, and I've got the framework here again, and then we've got a couple of scenarios that actually model its use. So if you want to go in and have a wee look, I've got a research question looking at a number of different sources and then addressing the questions within each to help model to the researcher or the student just how they will go about using it. And then I've deliberately added one in there for a law topic, because that's my client base. And then there's another a book coming. Well, there is a book out around essential legal skills for law students, and we're hoping to have a chapter in there particularly suited more for our undergrads, where they don't go into as such detail. So so really that's what we're doing at the moment, and I'm hoping to perhaps in the future to evidence what we're doing, seeing how the teaching's working, and then with the guidance of the law faculty, being able to incorporate it into some AI literacy education as well.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, so I've been following Catherine's work pretty closely. We did work together on the Information Literacy Spaces project, and I've been pretty excited to see how she's been using that work in there. And so I'm always welcoming feedback. People can contact me, tell me what they're doing, any questions they've got, that kind of thing. We've got time for some questions now. The last page of the slide, when you get the slides sent out or shared by Nora, is just, I've got the Te Whatu Aho Rau on my Google site. I've also got the project page where there's lots of blogs and stuff we wrote around information literacy. So it's an older project. There's not much action on that page anymore, but we're doing some really cool reflective thinking throughout that project, which you might be interested in reading about. I've put the Information Literacy Spaces model on the same Google site, and there's just the 4 publications around the frameworks that we have out. We've got just 2025 just coming up in December. Rupena and I are presenting at the International Conference on Distance Education. We're presenting a paper on bridging AI literacy and information evaluation using the framework, and then we've got a workshop on the framework as well. So that's forthcoming in those spaces. So yeah, happy to answer any questions. I'll stop sharing the screen and yeah, get the conversation going.
Thank you both, Angela and Catherine, for sharing lots of insights I get, especially the shift or the evolution from Rauru Whakarare framework to the new framework. There is no questions on chat. If anyone have any question, feel free to unmute and post your question. Yeah.
I stunned everyone to silence.
And interesting to know you are working on the bilingual explanation of the framework.
Yes.
I wonder, are you working on a simplified version? Anything?
No simplified version. I mean, there's a one page in the document. There's a one page that has the questions, kind of like what Catherine's got on the HP5 pop-up kind of thing. That's kind of like a one page kind of guide with the questions, but the detail and the depth around how to answer those questions and why the particular concept is important. Yeah, I've tried simplifying it, but if you lose the richness that's in there, and I think it's probably people who are in their different contexts and their different audiences. If I simplify it for one group, it may not suit another group's needs. So that's why we've made it Creative Commons, that people can adapt it, acknowledge it, but adapt it for their own context. But like I said, just be really careful not to reduce it back to a simple linear approach. And some of the ones I saw that had sort of made it simpler had removed the Te Ao Māori perspective, and it became very Western again. They were like, oh, you've left the most important sentence out of this this whole part. If you're going to delete something, delete this bit, not that bit. So yeah, really just staying true to the intention of it is important when adapting it. But I think, people in their own context will have ideas, and I'm certainly available to have suggestions, and I can get Rupena to have a look at anything as well. So yeah.
Yeah, we have no question on chat, but do you think that is the evaluation framework, the new one, gaining traction among librarians or other relevant professionals internationally outside of New Zealand? Do you know?
So the Rauru Whakarare framework did go a little bit international. I saw it on a British library blog, and they were impressed with the the thing. They said, "Think Rauru Whakarare, go that way." It was being used in Australia as an evaluation framework in a course for librarians, thinking about different ways to evaluate information. So yeah, there was some yeah, not widely, but I think because of the Aotearoa New Zealand context. And one of the things we're talking about at the conference is how might other countries use Indigenous people's knowledge to inform a similar framework. And it's not a matter of just swapping the language out, like change, putaketanga to a literal translation of that, because it's the thinking behind it. But it's hopefully promoting that you can bring Indigenous ways of knowing and understanding into what has traditionally been, in academia, a Western approach to this and thinking about information in particular ways.
Anyone has a question?
Yeah. No, so
Okay.
once the translation comes out, I'll be doing a big push, contacting people at university libraries who I know have the Rauru framework on their library web pages and asking them to swap it out. So the Massey Library, we've still got the Rauru Whakarare there, but we've taken that image off and just put a little link, and then we put the new image in to replace it. So that's front and center when people log in. And if people haven't used the framework before, obviously use the new one. But the old framework, yeah, it's again, like it's not horrible. But I think if people are more comfortable with that one, and it's better than nothing.
We've got a link to the old one as well.
Yeah. We don't want to go cars. We don't want to go crap.
No.
We want to use one that's for Aotearoa.
Yeah.
Kate, I'm invited to do more training. I'm absolutely happy to. So yep, reach out if you've got anyone that wants me to come and do professional development, talk on specific campuses. I'm happy to do that.
That's great.
And I think what conference, Catherine, next year were you talking? Was it the LIANZA conference or the?
Well, we've just missed our one this year.
Yeah, what's
but
the
I
one?
think well, yeah, we in 2 years' time there'll be another LIANZA conference. That's right. We should have a bit more to say by then, actually. How it's been used. Yeah. Watch the space.
We will. Any other questions?